The sky was overcast, and a light drizzle soaked the streets of the small town, where faded signs hung limply above shuttered storefronts. Emilio trudged through the rain, his worn-out shoes squelching with each heavy step. He pulled his tattered coat tighter around him, but it did nothing to shield him from the bitterness in his heart. Emilio had once had it all: a stable job, loyal friends, and a grand ambition. But his impatience had ruined everything. He had invested in a startup without careful thought, desperate for quick success. When the first failure struck, he blamed his teammates, fired his employees, and drove himself into ruin. One by one, his clients left him. The last of his borrowed money vanished into thin air. Now, he had nothing. Emilio wandered the city, applying for jobs, but every door slammed shut in his face. No one trusted a failure. Exhausted and defeated, he slumped onto the steps of a closed shop. The dim streetlights cast shadows over his weary face. Nearby, a stray cat rummaged through a garbage bin, and for a fleeting moment, Emilio felt a strange connection with it. He looked up at the sky and murmured, "Maybe I was never meant to be here." But before he lost all hope, he overheard a rumor. On top of Mount Cielo, there is a Zen master who helps lost souls find their way. Emilio set out on his journey. Mount Cielo was far from the city, beyond a dense forest filled with treacherous paths. No transportation could take him there, only his determination and his own 2 feet. The journey was harsher than he had imagined. The rocky trails cut into his already worn-out shoes. Each step was a battle. At night, the temperature dropped to near freezing, but he had no blanket, only a handful of twigs to make a small fire. For the first time in his life, he had to survive on wild berries. 3 days passed, and his body was nearly at its limit. As he neared the mountain peak, a sudden downpour turned the dirt paths into rushing streams. His footing slipped, and he tumbled down a slope, crashing through bushes before losing consciousness. When he woke, he found himself in a simple wooden hut, warm and dry. Sitting before him was an elderly man with a long white beard, dressed in a simple robe, smiling gently. "You have made it here," the Zen master said, "but you are not yet ready." Emilio shared his story, pouring out his regrets. The master listened in silence. When Emilio finished, the old man simply stood up, picked up a small bowl, and handed it to him. "Fetch water from the stream on the other side of the mountain." Confused but obedient, Emilio took the bowl and began his task. But the stream was far, nearly 2 miles away through thick forest. He filled the bowl with water, but by the time he returned, most of it had spilled out. The master only smiled and repeated the request. Day after day, Emilio carried out the task. At first, frustration consumed him. Was the old man mocking him? But slowly, he began to understand. He needed to move slowly, carefully, focusing on each step. He learned to breathe evenly, to balance the bowl, to stay present in the moment. After a week, he could return with a full bowl of water, not a drop lost. "Now you understand?" the master said. "Life is not a race. When you rush, you lose what is most important." Emilio did not return to the city to restart his life. Instead, he stayed on the mountain, building a refuge for those who, like him, had once been lost. He opened a small center at the base of Mount Cielo, welcoming those who had failed in life. He taught them how to work with their hands, cultivate the land, and most importantly, rediscover patience and inner peace. Word of the teacher of the mountain spread far and wide. People who had lost their way sought him out. They learned not just to survive, but to appreciate every step of their journey. Years later, when Emilio had become a true teacher himself, he returned to the peak of the mountain to thank the Zen master. But the humble wooden hut was empty. Only a simple note remained. "When you have found yourself, I am no longer needed. Continue your journey."